Hey guys, Jenni here. Welcome to this week's Open Boat. Today I wanted to talk about something that became really near and dear to me because I love history, and being able to preserve history is very important to me, and it should be for everyone in every aspect of your life. It doesn't just have to be fishing, it could be through your family tree, through anything, but specifically with fishing. Featured in the September edition of the Fisherman Magazine, I wrote an article on the Monmouth Beach Cartoppers. Now, this wasn't just me, going to the library and opening up a book about the history of striped bass or something like that, kind of reflecting on the biology open boats that I did in the past. I sat down with a couple of the last Monmouth Beach Cartoppers that are still around today. We sat down over breakfast, and I kid you not, I believe we were sitting down for probably 2.5 hours just talking and sharing stories, and they brought photo albums this thick of all their pictures of all their memories being cartoppers. And I wanted to share, if you didn't have a chance to read the September edition, or if you're not subscribed to the New Jersey edition, if you're subscribed to New England or Long Island, of course, you can access it on the website. But I wanted to share more of their photos that they provided and talk about when this was, why this isn't a thing anymore, and why we should always be observant to the ever-changing environments that we fish in, the fishery itself, what's going on behind the scenes with every local town, all the beaches we fish in, and how our coast all up the Northeast has been changing over the years. So cartoppers, literally the name, they would take their cars, drive down the beach, and they would have a tin boat on the roof of their car, and the motors would be in the trunk or the back seat. They would go to these beaches, park their buggies, take the tin boats off the roof, run them down the beach to the surf, run back up to their cars, get their motors, attach them to the boats, and then if you're familiar with surfing or launching your kayak off the surf, you have to time the waves anytime to get past the bar and get out there fishing or surfing or whatever you're doing. So the cartoppers had to do that too in tin boats. I'm talking 10 to 14 foot tin boats. And if you ever fished in a tin boat, on a lake, you know how, they're tin, how, that's a little risky. And launching them off the beach into the open ocean, that takes a lot of guts, and these guys definitely had it. So they would be launching these tin boats off the surf to target a bunch of different species, because back in the day, first there was the mosquito fleet up to the cartoppers into the early 2000s. So we're talking about, 1960s up to the 2000s for all of those different fleets. Party boats usually didn't go out as far as they do today. Sometimes they would just leave the inlet and then stick around around the inlets. So cartoppers would go to the other beaches and launch and get into fish. And they would target, striped bass. Weak fish was abundant back in the day. Everything from bluefish, fluke, whiting. You don't hear that a lot anymore, whiting. They would target a ton of different species, and they would make it a whole family event. Family members, their wives, their kids, their relatives, all that would come onto the beach and have a picnic while they went fishing on their little tin boats. And of course, they didn't have navigation. They didn't have, navionics, anything like that, radar, nothing. So when they had to come back in, obviously the whole aspect of this fishing is they relied on observation. But when they had to come back in, you had to do the same thing with launching, with timing the waves to come back in. So the whole aspect of the cartoppers is just this wicked, awesome, roller coaster ride of a story. If it was still a thing today, I would 100% do. I feel like I'd be more confident doing it on a boat than on a kayak, because The tin boats are a little bit wider, and like a kayak, I feel like I'm like confined to like this little banana of a shaped boat. But I feel like today would be literally, like I said, like a roller coaster ride, because you're on this tin boat and then you're timing the waves and you go. But I'm sure that big relief that they felt when they finally made it past the bar and got out into the open ocean, the motors running, like they're ready to go out there and catch, was awesome. And even more rewarding to catch the fish that they caught, because the fisheries back then were affluent. There was so many fish around, a lot, like they mentioned in the article. You don't see it a lot today, and you can see how much the fishery has changed, unfortunately. So one of the big messages is you have to be grateful for what you have now, because you don't know how it's going to change in the future. Continuing on with the talk of change, why aren't car toppers a thing anymore? If you live at a shore town, the town is going to be building right on the beach, you know, the luxury condo apartments, the beach resorts, all this other stuff, and they don't want to hear motor engines starting up at 4 in the morning or at night at sundown on their beaches, because their residents are going to complain. So that was one of the factors as to why the Cartoppers fizzled out. Noise complaints, and then towns were liable for insurance reasons. God forbid one of these guys flipped their boats on the beach and got hurt, then the town is liable. So for insurance, they stopped doing that. And then of course, there's the political front and all that, but I'm not getting into politics. We're talking about, you know, a fun thing that unfortunately fizzled out due to undermining factors with towns and policies and stuff like that. And then another big thing that we're seeing today is the beach replenishment. The beach replenishment happening back then covered up a lot of these little nurseries around those small jetties up in northern New Jersey. I know a lot of you older guys know exactly what I'm talking about. Those little jetties provided little nurseries for a ton of little fish, and of course little fish bring in the big predatory fish, and they could fish off of these jetties to get these fish. Beach replenishment covered them up, and they're not a thing anymore. So the whole beachfront structure changed completely. One of the quotes from the Cartoppers said they don't see clam washes anymore, crab washes, even lobster washes. Like, me being born in 2000 and like I was hearing like lobster washes, like that's something never that was in like my time, or if it was, I was like a baby. Like you don't hear about that anymore. Like clam washes I knew about, but the crabs, but lobsters, like you just get them off the beach, like that's wild. But unfortunately, that's not a thing we see anymore. And then going into the fish that they targeted, they didn't have regulations as much back in the day, but still, weak fish. They were catching monster weak fish with ease off of their boats. Tons and tons of striped bass. And then whiting, I said before, whiting, that's not a fish you usually hear about anymore. They were catching a ton of whiting. And it was funny that when they started catching whiting, they knew that that was their telltale sign that like the fall run was kind of ending when the whiting showed up compared to having like a ton of striped bass around. So they had everything figured out. And of course it was fun while it lasted, but now you go to any of the beaches anywhere, you have to deal with badge checkers, you have to deal with long walks from, like if there's a boardwalk from the boardwalk to the beach. It's a long hike. So you can't really park your buggy, take a boat on there and walk it down. There's so many rules now that come to just beach access. Access is the biggest thing. You have private beaches that you're not even allowed to fish on anymore. And it stinks, because when I talk to these guys over breakfast, hearing about how things used to be sounded way more fun than how it is now. So it's unfortunate that things have changed so much, but the biggest message, and we're seeing it all through like the bluefin closure, the constant magnifying glass on the striped bass regulations, other concerns with our fisheries, the biggest thing you can do is voice your opinion. If you have a problem with something, don't just sit there and let it just run its course. Address it. Speak to the proper people. Write a letter. like do something about it to get your voice heard. And that was the biggest thing with the Cartoppers, was they were a part of like the town meetings. There was a battle back in the day with the bunker boats that they were up against big time. And the biggest thing is be involved. Your local fishing clubs, be involved with your local politics, be involved with your local fisheries, be involved with. If you see something that you're not happy about, like coming up this fall, stay tuned, say something. They provide public hearings for a reason, to voice your opinion, so we don't have another paradox where things change and we can't do this anymore, and we don't have these breakfast conversations of, hey, remember back in the day when we can do this? Yeah, it stinks we can't do that now anymore. So take that message from the Cartoppers seriously, because they're from a previous generation that's, they went through a lot, and these are wise guys, like literally not wise guys, like, oh, you wise guy. Like these guys are wise, like they're very knowledgeable, and they've been through a lot of history, and they've changed a lot of history. So one of the biggest things I always like to say is be the change that you want to see. Reflect on this article, read it when you have a shot. Hopefully the images you saw really were entertaining as much as they entertained me, and just cherish what you have now in the fishery, because unfortunately you don't know how it's going to change in the future. It's either going to be for better or for worse. So now that I'm done with this open boat, watch the rest of the video, but go fishing after this. Take some time to fish and appreciate the fish you're targeting, where you're fishing and like what you're fishing with, because you never know when that can change. So go fishing, enjoy history and everything it has to offer, and I will catch you guys on next week's open boat.